Whispers from the Veil. 5 horror stories from the forest of mysticism, prohibitions, and secrets. Preface. The forest's secret. The road to the dacha cuts through a forest that locals simply call the Veil. It's an ancient stretch of woods, dense with towering pines and twisted oaks, shrouded in perpetual twilight even on the brightest of days. Travelers speak in hushed tones about this forest, about its uncanny silence, its shifting paths, and the strange feeling that it watches you as you pass through. But there's more than just an eerie atmosphere to the Veil. Rumors swirl in nearby villages about a presence, a figure who haunts its heart. Some say it's a witch, others a spirit of the woods. She is beautiful, with emerald green eyes that seem to pierce your soul, and hair as dark as the shadows that cloak the trees. Those who encounter her are forever changed, their lives touched by the inexplicable, the supernatural. These are their stories. Each tale is a thread in the web of mystery surrounding the Veil. 5 different lives, 5 different encounters, but one undeniable truth. This forest is not what it seems. What lies within its depths defies logic, reason, and even time itself. The girl with the green eyes, the witch, the spirit, whatever she is, holds the forest in her grasp. To meet her is to gamble with your mind, your soul, and even your memories. The road to the dacha passes through this place, a mere stretch of asphalt for some. But for those who stumble off the path, who step too close to the unknown, the forest reveals its secrets, and the price of knowing is always steep. The Call of the Clearing. My name is Michael. I'm a photographer, though not a particularly well-known one. My portfolio isn't filled with exotic locations or glamorous cityscapes, but rather quiet, forgotten places. Abandoned houses, misty woods, empty train stations. There's something about their silence that draws me in. A mystery waiting to be captured. One early morning, while driving to my family's dacha, I spotted a stretch of forest bathed in golden sunlight. The mist clung to the ground, winding through the trees like ghostly rivers. It was perfect. I pulled over, grabbed my camera, and stepped into the cool embrace of the woods. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. The only sounds were the crunch of leaves underfoot and the distant calls of birds. The deeper I went, the more I felt a strange pull, like the forest was guiding me. My footsteps seemed lighter, almost involuntary, as if the earth itself urged me forward. After walking for what felt like an eternity, I stumbled upon a clearing. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. The grass shimmered as if dusted with gold, and wildflowers bloomed in colors so vivid they seemed almost unnatural. In the center stood a young woman. She was breathtakingly beautiful. Long dark hair cascading over her shoulders, her white dress glowing faintly in the morning light. She turned to face me, her eyes locking onto mine. They were a piercing green, like emeralds reflecting the depths of an ancient forest. A smile played on her lips, soft yet unnervingly knowing. "You're lost," she said, her voice as smooth as a lullaby. No, I'm just taking photos," I stammered, raising my camera as if it were a shield. She tilted her head, amused. "Photos of what?" I gestured vaguely at the clearing. "This place. It's beautiful." Her smile widened, but there was something behind it, something that made my skin crawl. "Beauty can be deceiving," she said, stepping closer. As she moved, the sunlight seemed to follow her, casting an otherworldly glow. I couldn't take my eyes off her, couldn't even bring myself to step back. "Would you like to see something truly beautiful?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Before I could answer, she extended her hand. I don't know why I took it. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe her gaze held me captive. But the moment our hands touched, a wave of cold shot through me. The world around us shifted, the vibrant clearing darkened. The golden grass withered, the flowers shriveled, and the air grew heavy with a sickly sweet rot. The trees around us twisted, their branches clawing at the sky like gnarled fingers. The woman's appearance changed too. Her eyes darkened, her skin grew pale, almost translucent, and her smile turned sharp, predatory. "What are you doing?" I gasped, trying to pull away, but her grip was iron. "You wanted beauty," she said, her voice now echoing, layered with something ancient and inhuman. "Let me show you its cost." I tried to scream, but no sound came. My legs refused to move, as if the earth had grown hands and was holding me in place. Shadows slithered from the trees, circling us like wolves. They whispered in a language I couldn't understand, their voices clawing at the edges of my mind. She raised her other hand, and the shadows surged forward. They enveloped me, cold and suffocating, filling my ears with a deafening silence. Images flashed before me, people I didn't know, their faces contorted in terror, their mouths open in silent screams. "Stop!" I managed to choke out, my voice barely audible. The shadows receded, and I fell to my knees, gasping for air. The clearing was empty now, desolate. She was gone. My camera lay shattered beside me, its lens cracked, its memory card missing. I stumbled back to the road, my legs trembling with every step. The sunlight was gone, replaced by a dull gray overcast. When I finally reached my car, I collapsed into the driver's seat, my hands gripping the wheel as if it were the only solid thing in the world. I haven't been back to that forest. I haven't even picked up a camera since, but every now and then in the dead of night I hear her voice, soft, melodic and haunting. "You wanted beauty," she whispers, "and now it's yours."
The Dance in the Forest. My name is Irina. I'm just an ordinary woman, a mother, a wife, an accountant. Nothing extraordinary, really. But there are nights when I can't sleep. Nights when the memory of what happened in that forest claws its way back into my mind. It was late in the evening, and I was driving back from our dacha. The road was narrow and wound through dense forest, with trees arching over it like a tunnel. I always found this part of the drive eerie, but that night it felt even worse. The air seemed too still, the shadows too deep. I was about halfway through the forest when I saw her. A girl in a white dress stood by the side of the road, her hand raised in a silent plea for a ride. She was young, maybe in her early 20s, and startlingly beautiful. Her long black hair fell in soft waves, and her skin seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight. I don't usually pick up strangers, but something about her seemed so vulnerable, so out of place. Against my better judgment, I pulled over. "Are you lost?" I asked, rolling down the window. She leaned in, her green eyes meeting mine. "Could you give me a ride, just a little further down the road?" Her voice was soft, almost musical, and before I could think twice, I unlocked the passenger door. She slid in gracefully, her movements fluid, almost too perfect. As I started driving, I tried to make conversation. "What were you doing out here so late?" She smiled, her gaze fixed on the dark road ahead. "I was walking. The forest is so beautiful at night, don't you think?" I didn't know how to respond. The forest to me was anything but beautiful. It was dark, oppressive, and full of unseen things. But her tone was so calm, so assured, that I found myself nodding. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence in the car grew heavy, uncomfortable. I glanced at her, and she turned to me with that same serene smile. "Would you like to see something special?" she asked suddenly. "See what?" I asked, gripping the wheel tighter. She didn't answer. Instead, she pointed to a narrow path that veered off the main road. "Turn here." "I don't think—" "Please," she interrupted, her voice soft but insistent. I don't know why I listened. Maybe it was the way she looked at me, her eyes full of an unspoken promise. Or maybe it was the strange calmness in her voice. I turned onto the path. The road quickly narrowed, and the trees grew denser, their branches intertwining overhead. The headlights seemed weaker here, their light swallowed by the shadows. After a few minutes, the path opened into a small clearing. "Stop here," she said. I parked the car, and before I could ask what we were doing, she was out of the car, gliding toward the center of the clearing. I hesitated, but something compelled me to follow. The clearing was strange. The grass shimmered as if coated in frost, though the air was warm. Fireflies flitted about, their light unnaturally bright. In the center, she stood, her arms outstretched, her face turned to the sky. "Do you hear it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hear what?" I said. But then I did hear it, a faint melody, ethereal and haunting, like a distant choir. She began to move, slowly at first, then faster, her body swaying to the rhythm of the unseen music. The fireflies gathered around her, forming a glowing circle. "Dance with me?" she said, holding out her hand. "No," I said, stepping back. "I should go." Her eyes darkened, and her smile faded. The music grew louder, more discordant. The fireflies' light turned harsh, their glow pulsating like a heartbeat. "You can't leave," she said, her voice no longer soft, but sharp, commanding. The ground beneath me seemed to shift, the grass twisting into thorny vines that wrapped around my ankles. The fireflies swarmed me, their light blinding. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. She was in front of me now, her face inches from mine. Her beauty was still there, but it had turned monstrous, her eyes too large, her smile too wide. "You shouldn't have stopped," she whispered. Then everything went black. When I came to, I was back in my car, parked at the side of the main road. The passenger seat was empty, and the forest was silent. I looked at the clock on the dashboard. It was 3 hours later than when I had stopped. I drove home in a daze, my hands trembling on the wheel. For days, I couldn't shake the feeling of her eyes on me, her voice echoing in my mind. Even now, when I drive through that forest, I avoid looking at the side of the road. But sometimes, I catch a glimpse of something in my rearview mirror. A flicker of white, a pair of piercing green eyes. And I wonder if she's still out there, waiting for her next dance partner.
The silence in the thicket. My name is Andre. I've spent most of my life in the woods. I'm a hunter, not for sport, but for necessity. I've always respected the forest, its quiet power, its secrets. But there's one part of the woods I'll never enter again, no matter how desperate I become. It started on a cold October afternoon. I was heading to an old hunting cabin I hadn't visited in years. The place was deep in the forest, a forgotten relic from another time. The walk was long, the air sharp with the scent of fallen leaves and damp moss. The forest was quieter than usual, the kind of silence that makes your ears strain for sound. By the time I reached the clearing where the cabin stood, the sun was dipping low, casting long shadows through the trees. The cabin looked the same as I remembered, weathered, with a sagging roof and a porch that creaked underfoot. But something was different. A fire burned in the clearing, its light flickering against the growing dark, and by the fire sat a woman. She was beautiful, with dark hair tumbling down her back, and pale skin that seemed to glow in the firelight. She wore a simple dress, too thin for the chill in the air. She didn't look up as I approached, though I was sure she'd heard me. "Hello," I called, my voice uneasy in the silence. She lifted her head then, her green eyes locking onto mine. A small smile curved her lips. "Good evening," she said, her voice soft and melodious. "What are you doing out here?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though every instinct screamed at me to leave. "I could ask you the same," she replied, tilting her head slightly. "This isn't your forest, is it?" Her words caught me off guard. Something about the way she said them made it feel like the forest truly belonged to her. I glanced at the fire, at the strange symbols drawn in the dirt around it, and felt the first twinge of real fear. "I was just passing through," I said, shifting my weight nervously. "Stay," she said suddenly, gesturing to the fire. "You must be cold. I've made supper." I hesitated. Something about her made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end, but the smell of food, rich, savory, made my stomach ache with hunger. Against my better judgment, I nodded and sat down on a log across from her. She handed me a bowl of stew, and I noticed her hands were impossibly delicate, her fingers almost too long. I took the bowl, muttering a thanks, but the moment the food touched my lips, a cold sensation shot through my body. My muscles stiffened, my arms falling limp. The bowl slipped from my hands and shattered on the ground. I tried to move, to speak, but I was frozen, trapped in my own body. She leaned closer, her green eyes burning into mine. "You hunters think you own the forest," she said, her voice still soft but filled with a quiet menace. "But you only take. You never give back." I tried to protest, to beg, but I could only watch as she reached into the fire and pulled out a small object, a wooden figurine carved into the shape of a man. She held it delicately, turning it in her fingers. "This is you," she said, almost lovingly. "A life bound to the forest, but you've forgotten the rules." She placed the figurine in the fire, and I felt a searing pain in my chest. My vision blurred, and for a moment, I thought I saw roots growing from my feet, twisting into the ground. "Please," I managed to choke out, though my voice was barely a whisper. Her smile softened, almost pitying. "I could let you go," she said, tilting her head as if considering. "But you must promise never to return. The forest does not forgive twice." I nodded frantically, tears streaming down my face. She reached out and touched my forehead with her fingertip. A wave of heat surged through me, and suddenly, I could move again. I scrambled to my feet, backing away from the fire, from her. She watched me with a calm expression, her hands folded in her lap. "Run," she said simply. And I did. I ran faster than I ever thought possible, the forest blurring around me. When I finally burst out onto the main road, I collapsed, gasping for air. I haven't gone back to that part of the woods. The cabin might still stand, or it might not. Doesn't matter. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see her face, hear her voice. And every now and then, when I pass the edge of the forest, I feel the earth shift beneath my feet, as if warning me to stay away. The forest doesn't forgive, and neither does she.
The Path Beyond. My name is Ksenia. I don't consider myself a fearful person. I love the outdoors and often wander through the woods with my dog, Rocky. There's something comforting about the solitude, the rustle of leaves, the distant calls of birds. But now, the thought of the forest fills me with dread. It was a cool autumn afternoon when it happened. The air was crisp, the kind that fills your lungs with a tingling freshness. I was walking a familiar trail not far from my family's dacha. Rocky trotted ahead, his tail wagging, his nose to the ground. The woods were unusually quiet that day. The wind was still, and even the birds seemed to hold their breath. I tried to ignore the strange stillness, focusing instead on the crunch of leaves under my boots and the sound of Rocky darting through the underbrush. Then I heard it, a low growl, deep and guttural. "Rocky?" I called, my voice sharp with concern. There was no response, just a rustling sound deeper in the trees. I followed the noise, my heart pounding. The trail disappeared as I pushed through brambles and tall grass, calling his name. Finally, I broke into a clearing. And there she was. A woman stood in the center of the clearing, holding Rocky by the collar. Her long black hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her pale face was serene, almost doll-like. She wore a white dress that seemed out of place among the autumn colors, pristine and untouched by the forest. Rocky stood unnaturally still, his ears flat against his head, his eyes wide with fear. "Who are you?" I demanded, stepping closer. "Let go of my dog." She looked at me, her emerald green eyes impossibly bright. A faint smile curved her lips. "Your dog found me," she said, her voice calm, almost soothing. "And now he's mine." "What are you talking about?" I said, my voice trembling despite my attempt to sound firm. "Let him go." She tilted her head as if studying me. "I could, but there's a price." The air around us grew heavier, the light dimming as if a cloud had passed over the sun. The once vivid clearing seemed muted, the colors fading. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Her smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed unnaturally sharp. "A trade. A part of you for a part of him. Fair, isn't it?" I froze, the weight of her words sinking in. A part of me? What did that even mean? "No," I said, my voice firmer now. "I just want my dog back." Her expression darkened, the air around her seeming to ripple like heat haze. "Refusal has its consequences," she said. Suddenly the trees began to close in, their branches creaking and groaning. The ground beneath me felt unstable, as if it were shifting. Rocky let out a whimper, his body trembling. "Stop this!" I shouted, panic clawing at my chest. She laughed softly, the sound echoing unnaturally in the clearing. "You can't stop what you don't understand." Desperation took over. I lunged for Rocky, grabbing his collar and pulling him away. To my surprise, she didn't stop me. She simply watched, her smile returning. "Run then," she said, her voice low and haunting. "But you can never truly leave." I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and ran, dragging Rocky with me. The forest seemed alive now, the trees reaching out with claw-like branches, the path twisting and turning as if trying to trap me. When we finally burst onto the main trail, the air felt lighter, the oppressive silence gone. I collapsed to my knees, holding Rocky close. He licked my face, his tail wagging weakly. But his eyes were different, distant, almost haunted. I looked back at the path we'd come from, but it was gone, replaced by an impenetrable wall of trees. I don't walk in the woods anymore. Rocky refuses to go near the forest, and sometimes, in the dead of night, I catch him staring at the window, his ears flat, a low growl rumbling in his throat. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see her. Her green eyes glowing in the dark, her voice whispering softly, "You can never truly leave."
The Lantern Keeper. My name is Dimitri. I've always been a skeptic, a man of logic, numbers, and science. I never believed in ghosts, witches, or forest spirits. The world is full of rational explanations. At least that's what I thought until last autumn, when I encountered her. It was late. I was driving back from my dacha after a long day of repairs. The road was narrow and flanked by endless trees, their bare branches clawing at the starless sky. My car's headlights pierced the darkness, but the forest beyond seemed to drink in the light, leaving nothing but an oppressive blackness. I was halfway through the woods when the engine sputtered. The car shuddered, then died, the headlights flickering out. "Great," I muttered, gripping the wheel tightly. I grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment, stepped out, and popped the hood. The silence was deafening. Even the insects and birds seemed to have vanished. As I fiddled with the engine, a faint glow caught my attention. I turned toward the forest and saw a light moving between the trees, soft, golden, like an old lantern, swaying gently in the breeze. "Hello?" I called, my voice cutting through the stillness. No answer. Against all common sense, I grabbed the flashlight and stepped off the road, following the light. Perhaps it was another traveler, someone who could help. But as I moved deeper into the woods, the air grew colder, the trees denser. The light stayed just ahead, always out of reach. Finally, I entered a clearing. In the center stood a woman holding a lantern. She was tall and elegant, her long black hair falling over her white dress. Her face was pale, almost luminescent in the lantern's glow, and her green eyes locked onto mine the moment I stepped into the clearing. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice low and melodic. "My car broke down," I said, my voice unsteady. "I saw your light and thought you could help." She tilted her head slightly, studying me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Help?" she repeated, as if the word amused her. I hesitated, suddenly feeling foolish for following a stranger into the woods. "If you could just point me back to the road." She raised a hand, silencing me. "The road is far," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "But I can guide you, for a price." Her words sent a chill down my spine. There was something about her presence, something otherworldly, like she didn't quite belong to this reality. "What kind of price?" I asked cautiously. Her smile was faint but unnerving. "A memory, one that you hold dear." I stared at her, my mind racing. "That's ridiculous," I said, taking a step back. "I don't have anything to give you." "Oh, but you do," she said, stepping closer. The lantern's glow seemed to intensify, casting flickering shadows across her face. "A memory for safe passage. Refuse, and the forest will take what it pleases." The trees around us seemed to shift, their branches groaning as if alive. The shadows stretched and twisted, forming shapes that shouldn't have existed. "Fine," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "Take a memory. Just get me out of here." She smiled wider, and her eyes gleamed with something that looked like triumph. She raised the lantern, and the golden light engulfed me. I felt a sharp pain in my head, as if something was being ripped away. Images flashed before my eyes. My mother's laughter, the first time I rode a bike, the day I graduated from university. And then, it was gone. When I opened my eyes, I was back on the road, standing beside my car. The engine purred softly, as if it had never stopped. I climbed into the driver's seat and drove away, my hands trembling on the wheel. But as I drove, a strange emptiness settled over me. I couldn't remember my childhood. I knew I'd had one. I remembered facts, places, dates. But the emotions, the moments, were gone, like pages torn from a book. Now every time I pass that forest, I see a faint light flickering between the trees. I drive faster, gripping the wheel until my knuckles turn white. Because I know she's still there, waiting with her lantern, ready to take what little remains. Conclusion. The unseen path. No matter how many years pass, no matter how many times I try to forget, the stories of the veil linger in the back of my mind, like a whisper that never fades. Those who have entered its depths never leave unchanged. Some never leave at all. The woods themselves seem to breathe, their twisted branches reaching toward anyone who dares to come too close, pulling them deeper into its mystery. The girl with the green eyes, the one they speak of in hushed tones, is not merely a legend or a myth. She exists. Her presence is real, and her power is undeniable. Each of the people in these stories encountered her in different ways, and yet they all share the same truth. The Vale is a place where the boundaries between the known and the unknown blur. A place where the laws of nature, of time, and of memory break down, leaving only the unsettling feeling that you are never quite alone. Perhaps there are still those who venture into the Vale, believing that they will be the exception, the one who leaves unscathed. But the forest is patient. It waits. And when it is ready, it calls. It offers something, an answer, a revelation, a moment of beauty. But it demands something in return, a memory, a part of you. For those who have crossed paths with her, for those who have glimpsed the truth hidden within the trees, there is no going back. You may leave the woods, but the forest never leaves you. The light of the lantern flickers in the dark corners of your mind. The whispers of the trees follow you home. And in the quiet moments, when the night is still, you may feel her presence just beyond the edge of your thoughts, waiting. The Vale is not a place you can simply pass through. It is a place that claims you. And once you know its secrets, you can never forget. This is the kind of mysterious, scary forest we have. Don't go there. Write in the comments if you liked the stories told. Subscribe to this channel and like this video. It motivates me to find more interesting stories and edit more videos. Thank you.